Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be here.
Today we're tackling a topic that I know is close to a lot of our hearts, managing tremors.
Especially for those of us who are, 65 and over,
Right.
keeping things nice and simple.
Yeah, you guys sent in some really fascinating notes and sources this time around,
Yeah.
all about, different natural methods and exercises and tips and tricks for dealing with tremors.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix of information.
And our mission today is to sift through all of this and pull out the most interesting and most helpful pieces to give you a clear understanding of, some of the natural ways that we can address tremors.
That's right. And, we've got articles about vitamins and herbs and diet and even a little bit of research.
And some really surprising connections.
Yeah, there are definitely some nuggets in here.
Yeah. For example, did you know that something as simple as a common spice that many of us have in our kitchens is actually being studied right now for its potential to help with inflammation?
I know, it's fascinating.
And then we also found some really interesting links between specific vitamins and what you're eating and tremors.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It's all connected. So why don't we dive right in? And let's start with something really fundamental, which is vitamin D.
Okay, great. Vitamin D. Now, most people know vitamin D for its role in, helping build strong bones.
Right.
But what's really interesting here is that it seems like vitamin D may also play a role in neurological health, and particularly something called neuromuscular coordination.
And neuromuscular coordination,
Yeah.
what is that in layman's terms?
Well, basically, it's the communication between your brain sending a signal and your muscles responding to it.
Got it. Okay.
So think of reaching for a glass of water. Your brain says, okay, hand, go grab that glass, and your muscles need to respond accordingly.
Yeah.
And vitamin D seems to play a role in making sure those pathways are functioning properly.
So it's not just about bones, it's about that communication between the brain and the muscles.
Exactly.
Interesting. And how much vitamin D do we typically need? Are we talking a handful of supplements a day or?
Well, the number that kept popping up in our sources was around 800 international units, or 20 micrograms per day.
Okay, 800 international units.
Yeah. Now, of course, getting enough vitamin D can be tricky, so let's talk about some food sources that you can easily incorporate into your diet.
Awesome. Yeah, because I think sometimes it's hard to get everything you need through food alone.
It can be, so fatty fish are a great place to start.
Oh yeah, I love salmon.
Salmon is a fantastic option, yeah. And whether you go for wild or farmed, it's a good source.
Interesting.
Farmed Atlantic salmon, for example, has about 526 IU in a 3.5-ounce serving.
Wow. So that's a pretty good chunk of your daily needs right there.
Yeah, it is. And actually, wild-caught salmon can sometimes have even more.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
It can vary depending on the, species and where it's from, but wild-caught sometimes has a higher amount.
So if you like fish, it sounds like salmon's a pretty good bet.
Definitely. And it's not just salmon. Other fatty fish like halibut and mackerel are good sources too.
Oh yeah, I love mackerel.
Yeah, so halibut provides around 190 IU per serving, and mackerel has even more, about 643 IU.
So really packing it in there.
Yeah, so a nice variety of fatty fish can really contribute to your vitamin D intake.
And what about some of the more convenient options, like, if you're looking for something that's, easy to keep in the pantry?
Yeah, canned fish is a good option.
Canned fish.
Yeah, so canned sardines, for example, are actually a surprisingly good source of vitamin D. They have about 193 IU per 3.5 ounces.
Oh, wow.
And then canned light tuna is another option that can provide up to 269 IU in the same serving size.
So those are really easy to have on hand.
Exactly. They're convenient, they're relatively inexpensive, and they can really bump up your vitamin D intake.
Great. So we've talked about fish. What about if you're not a big fish eater? Are there other sources of vitamin D that people could turn to?
Oh, absolutely. So cod liver oil is a classic supplement.
Yeah.
And just 1 teaspoon of cod liver oil provides around 450 IU of vitamin D.
Wow. That's a lot in 1 teaspoon.
It is, yeah. And then we have egg yolks.
Oh, yeah. Good old egg yolks.
1 large egg yolk has about 37 IU of vitamin D, and that can certainly add up.
Okay.
And a little tip here, if you choose eggs from pasture-raised chickens, those yolks can actually contain 3 to 4 times as much vitamin D.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because those chickens are out in the sunshine more.
Oh, that makes sense.
They're getting more natural vitamin D from the sun, so their eggs are richer in it.
So pasture-raised eggs, another good choice. And then we also have mushrooms, which is interesting because they're not an animal product.
Right. Mushrooms are unique in that they can actually produce vitamin D when they're exposed to UV light.
Oh, like us?
Kind of like us, yeah. Our skin produces vitamin D when exposed to sunlight, and mushrooms do something similar.
Interesting.
Now, they produce vitamin D2 while we produce D3, and both types help raise blood levels, but D3 might be slightly more effective.
Okay.
Still, some wild mushrooms like morels can offer a decent amount of vitamin D2, around 136 IU per cup.
So even if you're not a big meat eater or fish eater, there's still options out there.
Absolutely, and let's not forget about fortified foods.
Oh yeah, fortified foods. What are some examples of those?
Well, cow's milk is commonly fortified with vitamin D,
Right.
and you'll usually find around 115 IU per cup in the US.
Okay.
And if you're avoiding dairy, fortified soy milk is another good option to consider because vitamin D isn't naturally found in many plant-based foods.
Right. It's important to get it from somewhere.
Exactly.
Now, this is where things get really interesting with vitamin D.
Okay.
When we were looking at the research about vitamin D supplements,
Yeah.
we came across this concept of a U-shaped curve
Yes, the U-shaped response curve.
in relation to fall reduction. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is fascinating. So studies have shown that when it comes to preventing falls in older adults, low doses of vitamin D supplements might not really do much.
Okay, so low dose, not huge impact?
Right. But then medium doses seem to be associated with a decrease in falls.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the twist. Very high doses don't seem to offer further benefit and in some cases might even increase the risk of falls. It's not a simple case of more is better.
So there's like a sweet spot.
Exactly. One study pointed out that the greatest reduction in falls happened when blood levels of vitamin D were between 32 and 38 nanograms per milliliter.
Okay.
And then the rate of falls actually started to increase when levels went above 40 to 45 ng milliliter.
So it's not about megadosing, it's about finding that right level.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to talk to your doctor
Right.
to figure out what dosage is appropriate for you because it can vary depending on your individual needs.
So don't just go out and buy the biggest bottle of vitamin D you can find.
No, definitely not. It's best to have that conversation with your healthcare provider.
Right. And speaking of healthcare providers, while, sunshine is a natural way for our bodies to produce vitamin D,
Yes,
it's also important to balance that with the risk of, skin cancer.
absolutely.
Organizations like the CDC, they recommend practicing sun safety, seek shade, use sunscreen, wear protective clothing.
Right.
So it seems like relying on food sources and then talking to your doctor about, appropriate supplementation
Yeah,
is a safer and more reliable strategy for most people.
I agree.
Okay, great. So we've talked about vitamin D. Let's move on to another important group of vitamins, which is the B vitamins.
Okay, the B vitamins now, these are a whole family of nutrients that are involved in a lot of different processes in the body.
Right. B vitamins are essential.
They're essential, yeah. And particularly when we're talking about tremors, they play a key role in energy conversion.
Energy conversion.
Yeah, basically helping your body use the energy that it gets from food.
Okay.
And they're also really important for maintaining a healthy nervous system.
So when we're talking about tremors and, neurological health, B vitamins seem to be really important.
Absolutely. And within this group, there are a few specific B vitamins that stood out to us in terms of their relevance to this topic.
Okay, so which B vitamins should we be paying the most attention to?
Well, first up, we have vitamin B1, also known as thiamine.
Okay, B1 thiamine.
And thiamine is crucial for supporting the production of neurotransmitters.
Now remind me, what are neurotransmitters again?
Oh, they're the chemical messengers in your brain that allow nerve cells to communicate with each other.
Oh, right. So they're like the little signals zipping around in our brains.
Exactly. And B1 is also involved in the production of dopamine, which is interesting because dopamine is often linked to Parkinson's-related tremors.
Oh, right. Yeah, dopamine is something that we hear a lot about with Parkinson's.
Yeah. So making sure you have enough B1 could be important for supporting dopamine production.
Okay, so how do we get enough B1? What are some good sources of that?
Great question. Some excellent sources of B1 include whole grains, different types of meat nuts and seeds.
Okay.
Pork and salmon are specifically highlighted as good options.
So again, another reason to eat salmon.
Right.
Good for vitamin D, good for B1.
Exactly. And you can also find B1 in foods like black beans, mussels, even brown rice and green peas.
So there's a good variety there.
Yeah, and in terms of how much you need, the generally recommended daily amount for adults over 50 is a little bit higher for men, around 1.7 milligrams,
Okay.
compared to 1.5 milligrams for women.
So just slightly more for the guys.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's B1. What's the next B vitamin on our list?
Okay, next up is vitamin B6.
B6.
And this is another one that's involved in a wide array of bodily processes.
Kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, it really is, and you can find it in diverse food sources. choices.
Like what?
Well, for seafood lovers, there's tuna snapper and mahi-mahi.
Okay.
And for those who prefer poultry lean, chicken breast, ground turkey, and both roast turkey breast and chicken thigh are good sources.
So lots of good protein sources there.
Yeah, and similar to B1, the RDA for adults over 50 is 1.7 milligrams for men and 1.5 for women.
Now, I remember when we were looking at this information, there was a little bit of a cautionary note about B6 supplements.
Yes, that's an important point to bring up. While getting B6 from food is generally very safe, some sources suggest being cautious with very high doses of B6 from supplements.
Okay, why is that?
In some cases, it's been linked to peripheral neuropathy, which is a condition that involves nerve damage in the extremities, like your hands and feet.
So it's like too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Exactly. And that's why, as we've said before, moderation and consulting with your healthcare provider is always key.
Right. Always check with your doctor before starting any new supplements.
Absolutely.
Okay. And what's the last B vitamin we should talk about?
That's vitamin B12.
B12.
And B12 is really important for a couple of main things. It helps to form red blood cells.
Okay.
And very importantly, for our conversation today, it keeps the nervous system healthy.
Right, because that's what we're all about here.
Exactly.
Healthy nerves.
Now, the dietary sources of B12 are primarily found in animal products.
Okay.
So meat and poultry, like beef, pork, chicken, turkey, especially leaner cuts, are good sources.
Okay.
Fish and seafood, like salmon, trout, mackerel, also provide B12.
So again, more reasons to eat fish.
Right. And it's worth noting that for those who follow a strict vegan diet, they're often advised to take B12 supplements.
Right, because it's not really found naturally in plant-based foods.
Exactly.
Okay, so it seems like making sure you're getting enough of these B vitamins is really important for overall nerve function,
Yes.
which, could indirectly then have a positive impact on managing tremors.
Precisely.
Okay, great. Now let's move on to a topic that I know a lot of people find really interesting, which is the potential benefits of common herbs and spices.
Okay. Herbs and spices.
Yeah, my spice cabinet is pretty well stocked.
Mine too. I love using herbs and spices in my cooking.
Me too. It adds so much flavor.
Right. And it's so much healthier than using a lot of salt.
Exactly. And, who knows? Maybe there's some hidden benefits in those spices that could help with tremors.
That's what we're here to explore.
Okay, so before we dive into specifics,
Yes.
it's important to emphasize that we're talking about using these herbs and spices in reasonable culinary amounts.
Right.
As part of a balanced diet,
Exactly.
not as like a replacement for medical treatment.
We're not saying go out and start swallowing 2 tablespoons of turmeric. It's about incorporating them into your meals in a sensible way.
And as always, it's crucial to talk to your doctor before making any significant changes to your diet or starting any new supplements.
Absolutely, especially if you're currently taking any medications.
Right, because there could be interactions.
Exactly, particularly with things like blood thinners.
Okay, so always check with your doctor first.
Yes, and another important thing to keep in mind is the freshness of your herbs and spices.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And how you store them, because that can affect their nutritional value.
So you want to make sure you're using fresh, high-quality herbs and spices.
Exactly.
Okay, so with those important caveats out of the way,
Yes.
let's talk about some specific herbs and spices that caught our attention.
Okay, great.
So first up, we have turmeric, or more specifically, its active compound called curcumin.
Turmeric.
Yeah, turmeric has been studied quite extensively for its anti-inflammatory properties.
Yes.
And there's ongoing research looking at its potential to help with pro-inflammatory conditions like arthritis.
Right. And what's really interesting is that one study even suggested that curcumin was as effective as a common prescription drug in relieving symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis.
Wow, that's a pretty significant finding.
It is.
So turmeric is something that I already use in my cooking, so maybe I'm on the right track.
You might be.
What's next on our list?
Next, we have sage.
Sage.
Beyond its culinary uses, there's some intriguing evidence that sage might have cognitive benefits.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some studies have suggested that it could help improve cognitive performance and potentially even lessen some of the effects of Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
And there's also some mention of phytoestrogens in sage, which might be of interest to some women for potential relief from hot flashes.
Okay.
Although that's not directly related to tremors.
Right, but still good to know.
Yeah,
Okay, so sage, another one to maybe explore using more in my cooking.
definitely.
Now, what about passion flower?
Passion
I
flower.
heard that mentioned for its calming properties.
You're right. Passion flower has traditionally been used for its calming effects and to help with anxiety and shakiness.
Okay.
And some research suggests that it might work by increasing levels of a neurotransmitter called GABA.
GABA.
Yes, GABA is a neurotransmitter in the brain that helps promote relaxation. So
Okay.
you can think of GABA as like a natural break for your nervous system,
Interesting.
helping to reduce overactivity.
So passion flower might help to calm the nervous system.
Yeah, by potentially boosting GABA, it might help calm the nervous system, which could lead to less shakiness for some people.
Okay. Now, how do people typically take passion flower?
Well, passion flower tea is a common way to consume it.
Okay.
However, it's important to be mindful of dosage.
Right.
Moderate to low doses are generally recommended.
And what happens if you take too much?
Well, high doses could potentially lead to side effects like dizziness, loss of coordination, and even more serious issues like liver problems or irregular heartbeat.
Okay.
So definitely consulting a doctor about appropriate use is advised.
All right. So don't just go overboard with the passion flower tea.
No, moderation is key.
Got it. What other herbs made our list?
Okay, another one is hawthorn.
Hawthorn.
And hawthorn is probably best known for its benefits for the heart and blood vessels,
Right.
but it also has some calming effects that can support nerve function.
Interesting.
And it does this by helping to improve blood flow.
Okay.
Now, while there isn't a ton of scientific evidence specifically for hawthorn and managing tremors,
Right.
it could be considered as part of a more holistic approach to well-being.
Okay. So it's not a magic bullet.
No, but it could be a supportive herb.
Right. And finally, we have skullcap.
Skullcap, yes. This one was mentioned in some sources as a potential natural treatment option for essential tremor.
Okay.
It can be taken in capsule form, typically around 1 to 2 grams, or as a tea, with some suggesting 2 to 3 cups per day.
So it seems like there's a lot of potential in these natural herbs and spices to support overall health.
Yes.
And potentially even influence tremor symptoms.
Right.
But as we said before, it's really important to use them responsibly
Absolutely.
and to seek guidance from healthcare professionals.
Always.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit now
Okay.
and talk about some broader dietary considerations.
That's good.
When we're thinking about, overall eating patterns,
Yeah.
what kind of things should we be thinking about?
Well, one dietary pattern that consistently gets a lot of positive attention for overall health and also shows some potential benefits for neurodegenerative conditions is the Mediterranean diet.
Mediterranean diet.
Yes, and the Mediterranean diet is rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and healthy fats like olive oil.
Sounds delicious.
It is, and the emphasis on foods that are high in anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties.
Okay,
Like berries, leafy greens, fatty fish.
all the good stuff.
Yeah, those might be helpful in managing neurodegenerative symptoms by reducing oxidative stress in the body.
So the Mediterranean diet is kind of like a good foundation.
I think so. It's a great place to start.
Yeah. What else should we be thinking about when it comes to our diet?
Well, staying properly hydrated is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, water is so important.
It is. It's really important for overall well-being, and it can also play a role in managing tremor symptoms.
Really? How so?
Well, dehydration can sometimes make symptoms worse.
Oh, interesting.
So making sure you're drinking enough water throughout the day is key.
Right.
And you can also boost your hydration by eating water-rich foods.
Like what?
Well, cucumbers have a very high water content.
Yeah, cucumbers are like 90% water or something.
All right, something like that. And watermelon, oranges, strawberries, even spinach are good sources of water.
So staying hydrated is a really simple yet important tip.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any things that we might want to consider limiting or avoiding in our diet when it comes to tremors?
Yes, some sources suggest that reducing or even avoiding artificial sweeteners might be beneficial.
Artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, there's some indication that they could potentially worsen tremor severity in some individuals.
Really? I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting connection.
So opting for natural sweeteners instead might be a better choice.
Right, if you're looking to manage tremor symptoms.
Okay. Good.
Mhm.
Anything else on the dietary front?
Yes. One of the studies we looked at explored the relationship between meat consumption and the risk of essential tremor.
Okay. Meat and tremors.
Yeah, and interestingly, it found that a higher total intake of meat was associated with an increased likelihood of essential tremor, specifically in men.
Oh, so this is specifically for the guys.
Yeah, this particular study only found the link in men,
Okay.
and the study didn't find the level of doneness of the meat to be a factor.
So it's not about how well cooked it is.
No, it was really about the overall amount of meat consumed.
Interesting.
Now, it's important to remember that this is just one study,
Right.
and more research would be needed to fully understand this potential connection.
But definitely something for our male listeners to, keep in mind. Now, for those who are living with tremors, every day, tasks like eating can sometimes be more challenging.
Yes.
So are there any practical tips or, assistive devices that our sources mentioned that could help with that?
Yes, absolutely. This is a really important area to address, and our sources highlighted several helpful adaptive utensils and tools
Okay.
that can make eating easier and more dignified for individuals who experience tremors.
Great.
So things like non-weighted, non-slip wide-set cutlery with silicone handles can provide a better grip and more control.
Okay, so something that's easier to hold.
Exactly. And angled utensils can also help guide food to the mouth more easily.
So these are really practical solutions that can make a big difference in someone's daily life.
I think so.
What other practical aids were mentioned?
Well, table trays can be very useful, especially if someone prefers to eat in a comfortable chair rather than at a traditional table.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And adult bibs are also a practical solution to help avoid staining clothes.
Right.
And there's absolutely no shame in using them.
Right. It's about maintaining dignity and independence.
Exactly.
Okay.
Suction bowls can help prevent accidental spills by keeping the bowl firmly in place on the table.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And for food preparation, cutting boards with an attached knife can be a safer and easier way to manage cutting tasks.
So there are all these little things that can really make a big difference.
Yes, these simple solutions can really improve the quality of life for someone dealing with tremors.
Absolutely.
And, as we start to wrap things up today,
Yeah.
it's important to reiterate some general advice
Go.
regarding natural approaches for managing tremors.
Let's bring it all together.
Yeah?
With some key takeaways.
Okay, so first and foremost, it's crucial to understand that while diet and natural remedies can be helpful in managing tremor symptoms,
Yes.
they are not cures for conditions like essential tremor or Parkinson's disease.
Right.
These approaches should really be viewed as complementary strategies
Right.
that can be used alongside other treatments recommended by your healthcare professional.
So it's not about replacing conventional medical treatment.
No, it's about working in conjunction with it.
Right. And as we've said several times throughout our conversation today, it's so important to consult with a doctor
Yes.
before starting any new supplements
Absolutely.
or making any significant changes to your diet.
Especially if you're already taking medications.
Right, because we want to avoid those potential interactions.
Exactly. And we want to make sure that any changes you make are safe.
Right. And what about the time frame for seeing any potential benefits?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it can really vary from person to person.
Okay.
It's important to be consistent with any dietary changes you make
Right.
because it can take time for your body to respond.
Right. Our bodies don't change overnight.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
similarly, herbs often work by supporting the body's natural functions.
Right.
So noticeable effects might not be immediate,
Okay.
and the duration of use for herbs can also vary,
Okay.
which is another reason why seeking professional guidance is so important, especially for long-term use or when managing specific health conditions.
So patience and consistency are key.
Definitely.
Along with that, all important guidance from healthcare professionals.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to sum up our deep dive today,
Yes.
we've explored how incorporating foods rich in specific vitamins like D, B1, B6, B12 could be beneficial.
Right.
We've looked at the potential of certain herbs and spices like turmeric, sage, passion flower, hawthorn, skullcap.
Yes.
We talked about the importance of an overall healthy diet like the Mediterranean diet
Right.
and the simple but critical role of staying hydrated.
Yes.
And finally, we touched on some practical eating aids that can make mealtimes easier.
Exactly. And throughout our conversation today, the recurring theme has been the absolute necessity of working closely with your healthcare providers
Right.
for personalized advice,
Right.
particularly when it comes to supplementation and any potential interactions with medications.
Right, because everyone's different.
Absolutely. What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's really about that personalized approach.
Exactly.
So as you think about all these natural avenues that we've explored today,
Yeah.
here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
Considering all these potential ways to support your well-being
Yes.
through diet and natural approaches,
Right.
what's one small, manageable change you might consider incorporating into your daily routine to see if it makes a difference for you?
I love that question.
The connection between what we eat and how our bodies function is constantly being uncovered.
It's amazing what we're learning all the time.
So who knows what other surprising links we might discover in the future.
It's an exciting time to be exploring these connections.
It is. Thank you for diving so deeply into this topic with us today.
It was my pleasure.
We really hope this information has been useful and empowering for you.
Yes, we hope you found it helpful.
Until our next deep dive.
See you then.